Hi, guys. It's me and Claire.
Hello, everyone.
We are here with Marius and Danielle Elenis, our very, very good friends. And we thought we would come and bring you something special. Say hi, Marius and Danielle.
Hi,
Hi.
guys.
Yeah, so today we wanted to do something a little bit special. And we prayed and fasted and in sackcloth and ashes, for about 40 days together to come up with this title. And so we decided that we wanted to call this particular thing that we're doing Lamborghini Tears. How do you feel about Lamborghini Tears, Claire?
I love Lamborghini Tears
And why do we love Lamborghini Tears?
because we'd rather be crying in a Lamborghini than
Than anything else. That wealth mindset problems are a whole lot better than poverty problems. And we wanted to begin to address the differences and the comparing and contrasting. And Marius is going to moderate the discussion, but we wanted to begin to compare and contrast mindsets and different things like that and talk about some of our own personal experiences. A lot of times we get in these conferences and we do these things and everybody gets up and we tell you all these great things and all these awesome things that are happening. And two problems I have is that one, it's never very practical. And two, we only tell you about when we won. And it's important, I think, in this discussion that we have both sides of that conversation. So, Marius, Danielle, I will turn it over to you guys.
Thanks so much. First, I want to say hi to all the Patreon folks from Joseph and Claire's site. We honor you and honor this platform, and it's a delight to have the Sturgeons with us. We're actually in our home in Haddam, Connecticut. This is where this is being recorded, and the Sturgeons are in our dining room, and Danielle and I are in my office. Danielle, would you like to say something to the crowd?
Hi, everybody. We've been having a great time, and as Joseph said, we just came off a fast and been praying about this podcast. So it's been really good to reunite after that time together.
Yes.
And it's a great honor to be with you guys, and really looking forward to this podcast and what's going to come of it.
Well, one of the things that I think would be good for us to start with, this is not scripted, everyone. We did not plan what we're going to say. We ran a few things by everyone and the Lord, of course. But we did discuss these things at length and some of the items that are going to be coming up. But we didn't say this is what we're going to start with. This is where we're going to go. This is what it's going to look like. We wanted it to be unscripted so that there's an extemporaneous and also, we believe, spirit-led part to everything that we're doing. And I think it might be good for us to address this matter of, we didn't plan for the Sturgeons to come and we do this together. We never planned to do stuff with them as it pertains to ministry, business, or anything. We just wanted friendship and relationship. You guys want to say something about that? Because I think it's so important.
Yeah, it is, and I think even from the outset, we've said it's like we've never, and I came up last year and we didn't do anything ministry related at all, and from day one, it has always been family related, and being friends, and we've had a good time, and we will continue to have a good time for a long time, and we may never do one of these again, or we may do more, or whatever. Danielle says no more.
One of the four of us kicked and screamed about this. We'll let you imagine who that was.
Yeah, so it's been about relationships since the beginning, and that's why I love it, and that's why I respect it, is because all the stuff that we're doing together is founded on that relational aspect, and I refuse to do it any other way. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, here we go, guys. We want to focus, as we had agreed, on things pertaining to the wealth building aspect of what we're all a part of. We have had a focus on the business, entrepreneurial, investing side of the kingdom. And one of the things that I think we've done well that perhaps we can share, we're going to go to the stuff we didn't do well as well. But one of the things we've done, I think all four of us, is we tore down this wall between secular and sacred. that has put such limitation on people who do operate in the ministry arena from being able to build wealth, to be wealthy, and to accomplish great things through that wealth.
Yeah, it is absolutely something that I've witnessed in Marius and Danielle, is that they're doing it, and they're not doing it like everybody else is. I think there is a standard that everybody gets locked into, and even a complacency that Claire talks about that everybody gets locked into. And this is how it's done, and this is how it should be done. And I think it puts a ceiling over the possibilities of what you can do with wealth and how you can build it.
I think that shift between secular and sacred, I think that there are a lot of mindsets that go around that get stuck on, this is what wealth needs to look like, this is what spending money needs to look like, this is what enjoyment, discretion, blah 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 needs to look like. And I think in the same way, when you break down these walls, when you're with your relationship with God, in the same way, when you start breaking down those mindsets that you have, preconceived mindsets and almost judgmental mindsets that you have about wealth, I think that then there's an enormous amount of inflow that can come towards you that maybe couldn't come towards you before.
So true.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. The separation, it really causes, I think, such an issue really in the church, in the body. And we've seen it, a great example of that, I think, would be ministers or missionaries just feeling like they need to live at a certain level of maybe not engage with wealth or anything like that, and struggle and completely struggle their whole lives. And I believe that's kind of a little bit, we've experienced that, and we came out of that. So
yeah, a couple of things I want to draw out is, one is that when we label something and say this is what this is, we're limiting it to what it can become. And so if we say this is strictly ministry, this is strictly business, we're limiting both elements from being able to have a businessman or a woman that can transform the world through the inspiration that they release spiritually. And we also limit those who are in ministry by saying this is only ministry, from being able to build wealth in a way that transforms nations and economies by the wealth that is accrued and distributed or properly stewarded. Because for us, it's all about stewardship. We know that we own nothing. We are here on a magnificent property that Yahweh gave to us, we believe, and we are enjoying our time with the Sturgeons, and it's all because we are stewards of something, but not owners of anything. And the second thing I would say is that when we put up this wall, this separation between secular and sacred, we relegate ourselves, especially those who minister, to almost the shame of having abundance or more than enough, which has always plagued the ministry. There's always been this unspoken, and sometimes spoken maybe in some circles, resentment of the wealthy, though everybody expects them to come and give a big tithe, that sort of thing. And so we've taken that shame off the table and said, we're not ashamed to say we live in abundance and we are blessed, obviously in humility, obviously tempered, and yet we recognize that there's no separation between what we do to impact people through ministry and what we do to impact the world through our businesses.
Yeah, and so something that you touched on about the despising of the church of the wealthy, and one of the things that has done is made wealthy people despise the church. Meaning that there are certain places where wealthy business people that I know and that I'm connected with, they're not going to go to that place because they see the poverty that exists there and don't want anything to do it. And every now and again they'll, so one of two things happens. Either if they decide to insert themselves into the situation, they either run away, or they insert themselves into the situation and end up feeling guilty for the life that they built for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's not something that is healthy or advances the kingdom in any way whatsoever. And
I think something that happens is when you rip that off, and when you take off that shame or that guilt or whatever else, or that moralistic, whatever it is, there is an enormous way for joy to enter the situation. You can actually celebrate, you can enjoy with one another, you can actually enjoy what you've earned, what you've, the abundance. Because I think that's a big part of it, is we always feel, okay, we've got to give this, we've got to give this. And yes, that is part of it. We do have a responsibility, but there's also an enjoyment that I believe God wants us to experience.
It's okay to do nice stuff.
It's okay to do nice things. Yes. So one of the things that we're all passionate about, the four of us, we've discussed this, we feel this emanating from all of us, is the education of others into the things that we have come into, not as experts, but as students of these subjects, and a desire to impart to others through our lifestyle, our example, but also the things we put forth, even through this very podcast or Patreon video. We're willing to share the things that we're learning along the way. And one of the things that we've been so passionate about is dismantling these mindsets that have developed in people and been ingrained in generation after generation, even in the church, or maybe sometimes especially in the church, because of the poverty mindset. We hate the poverty mindset. We combat the poverty mindset, and we're training even from young ones on. We did it with our own children, how to have a mindset that's contrary to that. So I want to ask each of us to perhaps share, what is the poverty mindset to you? What does the poverty mindset mean to you?
Okay.
So I think we'll probably all share and then bounce off of each other a little bit. But for me, every sentence that begins with "I can't" or "I don't" or any negative aspect of something that has to do with that is "I can't" or "I don't." So it begins with, you don't believe something is possible. And when you don't believe something is possible, you've immediately set a ceiling upon yourself. But the problem with poverty mindset is, once you have decided something is impossible or not reachable for you, immediately all of the way that you read the Bible, the way that you engage God, the way that you engage things mystically or spiritually, your theology, the books that you read, the people that you listen to, your whole worldview begins to form around that concept of "I can't" or "I won't" or "I don't have" or "I can't have." And everything that you think becomes a justification towards it. And if anything challenges it, you immediately become angry and attack that thing because you're afraid to confront your own unbelief.
So you're justifying your position in all this by trying to hold on tenaciously to the erroneous mindset that you've developed. That's what.
Correct. Yes. Clear?
I would agree with you. I think it's also, so initially, I think it's connected to disbelief, disbelief in self, disbelief in God, because God said he would provide. And so essentially, by disbelieving in your own capacity, you're disbelieving in him too. And I think it goes further than that. I also think it's anything that creates a limitation. So anything that is encroaching and making things smaller rather than expanding and making things larger. I think that's part of it. I think it filters into every field. So it is not just related to finance. If you have a poverty mindset, say in the world of academics, if you have a poverty mindset and you're both competing for a PhD position, there are enough positions in the world for you to get a PhD position. However, you do not believe that because you think that there is only one aspect and you have to fight for it and you have to compete for it. In addition to that, you could say in any arena, sports arena, same thing. You do not believe that there is place for more than one person with talent. You do not believe that there is whatever it is.
And that's something that we witness all the time. All the time, we find people who are trying to fight over the same piece of pie. And it's because there's only one piece of pie left, and them not realizing that they could go bake their own. Go ahead.
And that's connected to the limitations on your vision, because essentially your eyes, in addition to not believing, your eyes then become darkened and limited in the scope that you are able to see in.
Oh, good. Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with unworthiness and insecurity. And so there's this idea and really fear of man. So a lot of it has to do with what will people think if we have this or that, especially in the church world. And then what happens, I think, is we place the blame on Yahweh, and we sit there and we say, oh, God will provide for us. God will provide. And yet we're, and I shouldn't be saying we were in this at one point. But I think people can say those things, and then you wonder, well, who is your father? And if that's how he's providing for you, it's a terrible representation of who he is to the people around us. And so I think it just emanates from walking in unworthiness, a lack of responsibility, to take responsibility for yourself, for your family, for stewarding, being a good steward, which I believe is one of our main assignments, if not our main assignment here on the earth. And then putting that on God and saying, well, he'll be faithful. And yet the whole time we're struggling.
So good. I would draw from everything that's already been said to formulate what I think the poverty mindset is. I would just contribute one other thing that I see it to be, and that is a wrong positioning as sons of God, as children of the Most High God on the earth, without recognizing who we really are and what we're capable of. The poverty mindset renders us incapable of accessing, through the Abrahamic covenant, the blessing that can bring all the families of the earth to blessing. So when Yahweh said to Abraham, blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply you, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed, that was a covenant. That was a promise from the God who created everything to a man to whom he entrusted that covenant. And because he spoke that, it's always there. And those who are Christ are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise, it says in Galatians. So when we say, I can't, there isn't enough, the resources of this world are for others, but not for me, which is my experience with my own family. It was this attitude of, we are not good enough, the unworthiness Danielle spoke of. We're not good enough to have these things. Other people are going to drive those cars. Other people why do you need a $2,000 pen to sign a check with? Why can't you use a BIC? Remember BICs, BICs?
Yeah, fine
right?
point.
Why do you have one? so I decided I'm gonna buy all the stuff my family said are not for us, and then just give it away, or it's not an issue. It's just this mindset. And the other side of the coin was this what I believe is hoarding. See, hoarding, it doesn't stem from lack, it stems from a poverty mindset. Because when you hoard, there is no amount that will make you comfortable, because hoarding is the result of fear that you're not going to have enough. And so we met a man in Cyprus who was hoarding wood for, firewood, and he had this huge pile, remember, in his yard. And one day I met this man and I asked him, I said, wow, you have quite a pile of wood. And he said, whenever I find wood, I keep adding to my pile, because one day there may come a time when there is no more wood to be had. So that doesn't stem from a lack of wood. That stems from a lack of faith that he could have everything he needs and more when he needs it. As though, my parents would say, we're saving for a rainy day, as though God's going to drop us on that day, who brought us this far, right? So it's this wrong positioning. For me, it's strategically wrong, because we are here as kings and priests to effect transformation, and we are limited in how much of that we can effect if we have the wrong mindset.
I agree. I love it. There have been several times where wifey here has corrected me with that kind of stuff. Is there was something that I wanted or desired, and I didn't have enough, or it wasn't this, and we've come out of that now. But there were times where I would look at it and said, yeah, there's not enough, and she would look at me and go, just go make more money. And I love that response, because there's such a limit. It's like we limit ourselves to what we currently have and what we can currently see. And when you begin to break beyond that and realize that there is, the first thing that's going to come is uncomfortableness. You're going to have to become uncomfortable. And becoming uncomfortable causes you to confront your own mindsets, but then also move farther in the context of what's possible for you.
So powerful. I'd love for Danielle to share the part she had in reforming my mindset in this. I am a product of her correction and minor rebuke, and in the way I was positioning myself in these things. Even though I'm teaching about these things now, it wasn't always so. And I think we're going to go to the it wasn't always so about other things as well, and also talk about levels and layers of poverty mindsets. I'd love to hear from Claire about that, because we had a discussion earlier about this. But Danielle, what happened with us?
Yeah, so we had small children at the time, and we were in need of a new vehicle, and we'd been driving cars that they were sort of reliable, but not great. And
The Red Dragon wasn't.
no, yeah, you're right. So Marius was looking at a truck one day, and he opened the door to the truck, and it was falling apart. It was so old, and the leather
Busted.
was falling off the inside. And he said to me, you know, I think it's okay. It'll be okay. I mean, nobody can really see it, and it should be fine. And I have to say, like, I was in that same mindset with him. We were always trying to find the best deal, and, you know, the cheapest things so that we could just get by, and all of these things, and thought that's how we needed to live. And the Lord spoke to me in that moment and said, you live in a town. We lived in a town that was upper middle class. We were pastors in that town, and the Lord said, if these are the things that you are you own and you have, and that the people around you in this town are seeing that you have, and you're proclaiming that your Father is so good, that God is so good, that he provides, then what kind of father, who is going to follow that kind of father? Who wants to follow that kind of father? And I was like, wow. Yeah, that's so true. And so at that time, I wasn't as outspoken as I am now. And I had to really, I know you would have loved to know me in those days, right, Joseph? A little quieter, a little less feisty. But I had to really, you know, prepare myself to bring this up to Marios because we were about to buy this car. And so we were driving, and finally I mustered up, you know, the bravery to say something to Marios about what he was thinking about buying. And I shared this with him. And at first it was a little bit of a struggle, and it was tough to take. But we really realized in that moment that Yahweh was calling us to live a different life, and to step into something new. And we decided that we would just begin to ask him to shift our mindsets. And so that weekend we went to church, and a woman in our church called Marios and said, you know, hey, can I talk to you? I have something really important. She said, I'm getting a new car, and I have a Lexus, which to us was like, you know, I mean, to anybody, it's a great car. I actually have a Lexus now. But anyway, she said, I'm getting a new car,
Not that one.
but not that Lexus. And I have a Lexus. It's not that old, and I want to actually give it. And she said, to Danielle. And so usually, you know, like we just knew, well, usually it would have been like to you, Marios, you know, he's the pastor of the church and all of that. But we knew that the Lord, it just really confirmed the Lord was speaking, because she didn't know we were looking for a new car. She had no idea what had happened. And she wanted to give us her Lexus, and she did. And it was a great car. And
from the moment Danielle confronted me about this, there was a silence that I think is a very critical silence to speak into right now for those watching this. There was a silence. I didn't talk because I was offended. Like inside, offense was crouching at my door, right? It hadn't yet come in, but all it would take is a tiny cracking of the door and it would have run into my life. Once offense comes in, a wall goes up. And the only way to break free from that is to repent, right? So I'd already learned those lessons the hard way. I didn't want offense to come in response to this, but I didn't like it. Just like some of you watching this right now, this may be rubbing against you the wrong way. Even this whole talk about wealth or all the things that we're discussing, I encourage you to go into that silence and let Yahweh direct your steps out of what could potentially be an offense. Because if you get offended, then a wall goes up and you can't receive from this particular stream that we are sharing right here, the four of us. So I just decided I'm going to listen to my wife. And I think that was one of the wise choices I've made in life. And by that time, this lady had already determined what she was going to do. But as a sign to us that Danielle was the one leading the way, leading us out of the poverty mindset as it pertained to nice things, this lady had already determined to give the car to Danielle. And I believe Yahweh orchestrated that.
Very cool. Do
It's
you
incredible.
have a story or something you want to say?
Okay.
Not really.
No.
Okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. I can remember 2 times in my life where I was completely homeless and living on the street and not knowing where my next meal would come from. And, I mean, you can talk about the grace and the goodness of God. None of it is possible. But in the process of doing that, one of the things that you learn to do, moving from that to where we are now, you constantly have to be on the offensive as it has to do with your own mindsets. Self-evaluation is a very healthy thing.
Yes.
So there's self-evaluation that leads to self-deprecation, but then there's self-evaluation that leads to progress. And to move into the place where you cry Lamborghini tears, you're going to have to learn to self-evaluate in a way that leads to progress.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I'd love for Claire to share with us some of the things you were saying earlier in our gathering here at the house about the different levels of the poverty mindset and how that can manifest in our lives, even when we've already come through certain layers of it, right? It could still go ahead. I think that was brilliant.
I think to start with, what you were talking about with the Abrahamic blessing. God blessed Abraham so that Abraham, all the nations would be blessed through him. He is a person. And God used a person to bless all the nations. And I think that is so important. That is the redemption of that poverty mindset, is a human who is able to bless all the nations, who is able to hold everything with his hands open so that everything can flow through him. And I think maybe that is the other side of the limitations, is the capacity. I think that a poverty cycle can hit you at different layers, and every poverty cycle has a ceiling, whatever that is. Maybe that's $5, maybe that's $10,000, maybe that's $30,000, or maybe that's $2 billion. But either way, there is a cycle that locks you into hitting that ceiling and coming back down again, and hitting that ceiling and coming back down again. And there's something in the thought process that doesn't allow you to push through that ceiling to the next level. And so part of that is being able to identify the ceiling. If you can't see the ceiling, you don't know what the ceiling of your capacity is, or the limitations of your capacity, because not the actual ceiling. It's your personal decision that's as far as you can get through subconscious, through mental blocks, through whatever it is. If you can't see it and you can't identify it, you never know when you're hitting it.
Yeah.
Part of that is actually being able to see that divide. We talk about the poverty mindset, and there is a certain portion who are living from paycheck to paycheck, and that's one section. But there is another section who are trying to make massive jumps from, we have earned a salary, it's more than enough, but now we're actually wanting to impact society. We're wanting to have enough finance that we can change a industry or be a big enough player in an industry where we can do something substantial. We have all these ideas, this ideology of what we want society to look like, how we want to impact whatever it is, whatever industry it is. But if we can't see that ceiling and we can't get past that ceiling, there's no outcome on the earth, essentially, no lasting outcome. And so in order to break through that, you need to see what that is. One of the viewpoints of this is, what is a consumer and what is a producer? If you can see the dividing line between producers and consumers, and if you're filtering into that, that is part of it. Another aspect is middle-class status symbols. Every class has them. If you don't know what they are, and you are striving towards that status symbol as your ceiling, then you're not going to jump through that ceiling into the place where you become the power player, where you start really impacting an industry. I mean, it's all very well to say you want to I don't know, shift the banking system or the medical system or whatever system it is, but you do not have the financial, the power, the whatever behind it, it's not happening. You
Right.
actually need to tangibly have something in order to shift governmental stuff. You need to actually have something tangible, and you need to be able to break through that ceiling so that you can start directing from that zone.
So what are some ways through which we can break through that ceiling? Some practical things we can say we've been doing or are doing, continue to do, because we get stuck at different levels at different times, right? And we have to break through. What are some ways we can?
I can start with that. So the first step in that process, in the measure that we've broken through, the first step of that process has been to become an expert in something, to master something. It could be spiritual stuff, it could be business, it could be whatever, but master something to the extent that you then become irreplaceable.
Yeah.
When you become irreplaceable in your field, when you know, people can say whatever they want to say, but the instant you become irreplaceable, it does not matter what it is that you're doing. When you become irreplaceable in the lives of the people, God will begin, and you will begin to be elevated above where that group of people is, so that you can lead them. And then you're looking for the next, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, the next thing. So the first thing is mastering something.
Mhm.
And the second thing is surrounding yourself with a group of people who you were irreplaceable in their lives.
Yeah, that's so good. I was going to say that second one. I have a quote here that I wrote on Friday. The day when I was picking you up, I was coming from the grocery store, and I actually stopped and dictated this into my phone because I was listening to the book by Andrew Carnegie, the steel manufacturer from the 1800s. The Rockefellers, the Carnegies, Du Bois, the Morgans, Ford, they transformed the world and made America the superpower that it was, because all these dollars were coming into the US to buy their products. So he's one of the tycoons that transformed the landscape, whether you like him or you don't. Some of the character qualities of these giants are things that I aspire to live by. And one of the things he said is the true road to preeminent success in any one line is to make yourself master in that line. And he went on in a whole chapter to describe how important it is and how to focus on one thing that you are gifted in and passionate about, to do that well. And if you do that, instead of, one of the things he was saying is, people want to invest in all these different companies they know nothing about and have no power to bring any transformation in. And yet at their very fingertips is the business that God gave to them. He said, you're looking to make money out of foreign investments in Chinese or Japanese or European or other American from the other side of the country endeavors. But he said, at your fingertips is the thing that you can get really good at and could be your greatest source of wealth. So I think that's so profound and in line with what you said, Joseph. And I couldn't emphasize enough the second part, which is you've got to hang out with the people that will challenge that mindset. For me, it was Danielle, starting with Danielle. If I'd become offended with her and actually put a wall between us, I would have missed out on the opportunity for her to pull me to the level that she had ascended to in terms of her mindset starting to change before mine. Yep. And it's the same thing with the people we hang around. That's one of the reasons we love being with you guys, because we are birds of a feather in so many different areas. And one of the things is we are not afraid to talk about these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to challenge each other through each other's notes on the subject.
Yeah, totally. I think that taking responsibility with what's been given to you, what you have. And so we want to change the world, and we want to do all these great things. And there's so many people that talk the talk and have all these great ideas that they're going to do, and then are praying about it and really begging God to actually do it, when Yahweh's given us the means that we need to actually be that change and bring that transformation and do what we need to do, which is what you guys are talking about. And so I have like I'm like, get a job. Just like get a job, figure out what it doesn't mean, especially, I have to say this, like, especially to people in ministry, I feel like, there could be people on here maybe listening or whatever. And maybe that mindset, there's still that separation mindset, like, oh, I'm going to work for the Lord and I'm in ministry, but you're struggling. And I feel like it's so important for you to you gotta get out of that mindset of ministry, and everything else is secular. We started out with that, talking about that, and because there's so much limitation put on people and their giftings and what they're really good at, if we have that mindset, and it limits us from taking responsibility in our own lives. And we have very good friends who have that kind of ministry mindset, and they actually believe that getting a job or going into business is not God's
It's
will.
a compromise.
Yeah, it's a compromise. It's compromising, and yet they're incredibly gifted. It's in their genealogy, this business, this gifting that they have. And so yeah, I just encourage you to look at what you have, look at what you can do, and step into it. And if you don't have the means, get a job. And that can mean a lot of different things. But I'm telling you, you've got what it takes. God's given you what you need to move forward and to step into that.
We love the outspoken Danielle.
Somebody has to say it like it is, and it might as well be Danielle. And if no one else will, she will. It's great.
We always will. Claire, you were going to share? Yeah.
Yeah, something else that Joseph's taught me that I think has also helped with shifting this mindset is I would think of all the different options available, multiple. Okay, so I need to get a job. Well, I could do this. We have 98 different options, and then I start optimizing, and I get almost decision paralysis. And something he taught me is that it is better to make a decision, even if it is the wrong decision. God will back you, because you drive all your energy, all your effort, all your focus, everything into that one thing, and it will produce excellence rather than diversifying and doing nothing really well. And I think that's been a huge. The other thing we have discussed is, if you haven't ever asked yourself the question, what would I do if God gave me $1 billion? How am I going to invest it? What am I going to do with it? And giving it away is not an option. What would you do with it? If you don't have a plan, how is God ever going to entrust you with that money? If you've never thought about it, he's not going to suddenly drop that into your lap and now you have to decide. And I think if you aren't thinking about those sort of things, I think that's one of the big shifts into what's the unreachable, whatever in your head. Now, what would I do with that?
Yeah.
How would I plan for that? How would I allocate that? What would I do to expand that? And I think that's a really important question, and especially for women to think through and to start investigating.
So powerful. So with much respect for this platform that is your guys' platform, and also with respect for everybody listening to this, I would like to delve into something that could be controversial, and I don't want it to come across in an offensive, insulting way. But I do think we overpray and put too much emphasis on praying to God to show us what to do, instead of harnessing that deposit of heaven and of our relationship with him that is in us to make a decision as a ruler, as a son, as a king, as someone who really carries the authority that comes from heaven because of the way we walk. Can we talk about how we over pray about things that we're supposed to just act upon in this area of stewardship?
Yeah.
For example, the $1 billion, if I could say this, Joseph, the $1 billion, what would I do with? A lot of people would say, well, I would go into this time of praying and asking God what I should do. Whereas I think he wouldn't have given it to those kind of people.
I tend to be a little bit more blunt and direct with my people, so they're okay with that. I would tell them to continue to pray is to waste their time. And not only are wasting your time, you're wasting God's time too. So just stop. And maybe go do something. And that's not, and the purpose of saying it like that and doing it like that is not to be offensive. I'm not trying to defend them. I'm trying to shock them into action.
Yeah.
I think that if you don't, again, like Claire was saying, if you don't know what you're going to do, then chances are it's not going to happen. And if you don't already have something in place that can produce that, chances are that's not going to happen. But I talk to people literally almost every single day, and I don't know what God wants me to do, and the answer is always, well, God wants you to do what you want to do. Now, what do you want to do? And there's this fear that comes up, right? Because what we've been taught our entire life is this thing where you have to do what God wants you to do. But if you can't hear God, and what happens if God stops talking, and what happens if all of these different kinds of things, and people end up confused and they never end up doing anything, like Claire was talking about, is because people have this childlike infant mindset where they have to be told to do every single thing that they want to do. And actually, God wants us to grow up.
Yeah.
In the process of growing up, learning to make decisions and making mistakes. The object is never not to make a mistake. The object is to not make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
And so to all these guys who are struggling with all of that different kind of stuff, what I would tell you to do is stop praying about it. Make a decision. God will back you up. And if you make a mistake, he will pick you up and continue moving, and surround yourself with people who back that. If you have negativity at any place in your life, if you're struggling and you're trying to move forward and you're surrounded by negativity, it's time to drop those friends and find new ones. Yeah. It's really begin to move forward and surround yourself with people who are excited about what you're going, and maybe not even understand. Like my family has no idea what I do. They don't understand this mystic stuff that we do, but they're excited about it and they support it 100% because they love me. So it's something I get passionate, maybe a little bit too offensive about, but I'm just very passionate about people making a decision and beginning to move forward, because the way I kind of see God working with it is your job is 0 to 1. And when you move from 0 to 1, God will direct the path that you're moving forward, but he can't direct it. He can't direct a path if there's no forward motion on the path.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So good.
So good. Yeah. I think that, I've recently kind of been thinking about faith without works is dead, and really what that means. And I really believe it alludes to what you're talking about, Joseph, which is, it's not about we tend to put that into this thing like, oh, if I pray for somebody and they don't get healed, I don't have faith, or whatever that is. And actually, to me, faith without works is always praying to Yahweh and expecting him to release whatever it is that you're begging for, rather than praying and making a decision. We need to pray, and the works is actually trusting him to be able to make decisions, to understand that we can decide, what do we want to do? Let's step into that. Whether I'm 100% positive that Yahweh spoke it to me or not, that I'm an adult and I'm mature, and he expects me to make that decision, and he's going to back me up. Man, if I relied on having it 100% right, it'd be really terrible, because I wouldn't do anything. I mean, I make mistakes every day as far as if I'm going to be in the perfect will of God, but I've got to make decisions if I want to move forward. And the works there is trusting that whether I make the right or wrong decision, Yahweh is going to make a way, because that's who he is. He's a way maker. And so it's the works is stepping into knowing that he trusts me. And I can trust him to back me up even when I screw up. And I'm gonna screw up. Like I can stand here and say I'm not in the perfect will of God. I wish I could say I was, but there are decisions I make throughout the day that aren't exact. I'm not like praying about every single thing I do. If I did, I wouldn't move, because I don't hear God like that every moment. And so that's just really important.
Yeah.
I think we project our understanding of, or our maybe our skewed view of perfection onto the perfect view of the will of God. And I don't know if our theology on the will of God is 100%. I don't know that there's one will and that's it, and you've got one chance to get it right. And I think that is sometimes where we move towards, is this perfectionism, but it's not the perfect will of God. It is the weaknesses of perfectionism that we are imprinting on that and calling that the perfect will of God. Whereas the perfect will of God might be multiple opportunities in which you succeed in every different area because you are his child.
Yeah.
So good.
So good.
If we can stay on this a little longer, because I think this is a very key point, and I feel like it's going over well, and people are being impacted by it. One of the things that I read recently was a book by a Delta Force operator. Delta Force is one of the elite counterterrorism units in the world. It operates out of the U.S. It's part of the United States military, tip of the spear of the United States military. And this particular author, who had been a Delta Force commander in his life, talked about what it means to be special forces. And I've had that background in my younger years. I went through the Cypriot Special Forces, and it meant a lot to me what he said, but I believe it applies to all of us in this particular room here, but also those listening, because of the kingdom and the aspects of the kingdom we are a part of. He said, what makes special forces special is that the operators are special. There's no special forces without the special people that make the forces special. So he said, what makes them special is that they are innately maverick type adventurers that do not think conventionally and do not operate conventionally. So they must enter a process that strips them of that autonomous empowerment that comes outside of proper understanding of government and authority and chain of command. But once they're broken down, they can be built back up again to be an autonomously empowered individual that walks that fine line between making sure they don't take too many initiatives that could destroy the whole, but also don't ask for permission to operate. And it made so much sense to me in the sense of why we haven't fit in church environments. For example, why we've been ostracized at times or been labeled the fringe or weirdos. And I feel like so many people that are a part of even this platform, though I don't know who's on here, I haven't looked at the list or anything like that, I just have this sense that a lot of us didn't fit because we are those special operators that have that. We're not just thinking outside of the box, we are outside of the box.
Right.
Don't you think?
I agree. Keep going. I agree completely. That is, yeah, go ahead.
So what I think happens is, in order to break through that ceiling that Claire described earlier, which I think is so key in all this, is we have to be willing to let go of some of the levels we've operated, and leaving a level is hard because of the people that are associated in that level with us. It's so hard for us. Even our families don't understand what we do. Like Joseph said, like my dad never said, hey, send me one of your messages. I want to hear what you talk about. It's more like, I'm so glad he didn't ask me, right? Like if he, but I'm also not glad he didn't ask me. Like I wish they would know more about our lives, but it wouldn't make sense to them because they don't have that capacity to understand this facet of the kingdom that we've latched onto. So if we let go of those we're associating with at this level and reach for the next level we're destined to attain, we will meet the people that have been there and are so happy that we've joined them. And in the area of wealth building, I want to say this. There are people that will be investors or benefactors or individuals who will impact what we are building, who will not release 1 cent in our direction unless our mindset shifts to where we are at their level.
Come on.
That's right.
So the mindset that there's billionaires out there that are going to walk into our small church and give us millions is the mindset that has kept so many people bound to a substandard mindset or worldview. And they don't even get to the ceiling, Claire. They're not even jumping off the chair. Like they're stuck at their seats, at their pews, if I could put it that way. So it's like, who's going to sow into that? It is so limited, so limiting, so powerless. But when you ascend to that next level and are willing to let go, not because you flippantly forsake relationships, especially family, but out of honor and love for them, you actually serve them better by being who you're supposed to be at the next level you're supposed to ascend to.
So good. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
And then the question comes in is, what is the emotional attachments that you have to the level that you're currently in?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go there. Why are we, why do we want to hold on to it? What is it that it gives to us that is our comfort food at that level that's actually making us obese at a level we're supposed to let go of to become super fit for the kingdom?
Yeah. Very good.
So, yeah, go ahead, Claire.
I think questions are important. And the whole way through this, we are all bringing up questions. And I think if someone is listening to this, that they should be maybe spend some time thinking about these. Take some time afterwards to actually go through some of these questions and really dig with yourself, especially over this Christmas New Year's time.
Yeah.
Very good. What are the patterns that we may be stuck in and we think that's the norm? That's our reality. I would be asking that question. I asked that question. We had guests not long ago in our home, not this home, but the previous one we had, where they're birds of a feather. We connected on every level. And I was telling them how out of stewardship, I like to squeeze the very last of my hair gel and to make sure that because it's so expensive. This hair gel is like really high-end stuff, I was telling them. And if I just want to get the very last, and they were listening to me. And at one point, the woman of the house said to me, why do you do that? Why don't not just buy a new tube when you get to the bottom? Why do you go through all that? And I said, because I want to steward every last drop. He said, just buy another tube. There's a fine line between stewarding and feeling like if I don't do this, I don't deserve to have a new tube. She said, you need to evaluate where you stand in that. And when I evaluated it, I was on the side of, I don't think I'm worthy of a new tube if I don't really take care of this one, which is the way I was raised.
And we're still working on that.
Okay, well,
these are,
there's a shortage of those. Like I tried to buy them the other day and they said, guys, I'm so sorry for Danielle, for what she's doing right now, because there's a shortage of these in the world and I'm hoarding them for the right.
These are all over our house.
I apologize
You will
so
find
much.
these all
I
over our house.
apologize.
I've never found a full one, except for
apologize.
box. Yep, here we go.
But I just want to point out, like, there's so much more in this than this. Danielle, because there's still some in it, and there's a shortage right now. I'm so sorry, Sturgeons. Like this is I will apologize later. Patreons, I'm so sorry.
No, it's good. So one of the things as you start doing this, right? So how do you measure progress? And so it's one of the questions that comes up is how do you measure progress as you're moving forward in this stuff we're talking about? And one of the first things that you notice, and this is something that I have to watch out for, just me and my faults. This is platinum perfection sturgeon here. That's platinum perfection sturgeon here. That's not me, right? So you immediately notice the ceilings that everybody else has.
Right.
You notice ceilings that family has, you notice ceilings that friends has, and I've got friends that are going to be the friends the rest of my life, but I can see their ceilings. And one of the things that we have to be careful of is instead of taking that and looking at their ceilings and talking about their ceilings and even trying to help them with their ceilings, it's one of the things that drives me nuts is you see somebody else's ceiling and then immediately you feel like it's your job to go and help them get out of their ceiling. Instead of doing that, take that as time to begin to reevaluate. Am I stuck in the same way? Am I doing that? How am I doing that? And it goes back to the self-evaluation. It's really the most effective tool that I've ever found for measuring progress is the self-evaluation part. But you will begin to see ceilings around you. And the other thing that will help you guys, I'm going to encourage you to start spending money on travel. One of the things that will help you break out of mindsets, especially cultural mindsets, especially you guys are from the South, get out of the South. Right? Go travel somewhere in the world. And whatever that looks like for you, start to do that because that will confront you with your own personal mindsets. It'll confront you with your family mindsets. It'll confront you with your cultural and regional mindsets. And if you're an American, it will confront you with American mindsets and whatever respective country that you're from, because we all have them and you don't know until you see something different.
Yeah, that's so good. And I would also encourage those that are going to heed this and start to travel more to consider the trip to where you're going as much a part of the trip as the destination. travel well. If
Yeah.
it takes you longer to go out, I want to say something about flying business class, because this, we're going to talk about, perhaps even as the last part of this, get into some of the things that we've overcome and some of the ways by which we didn't allow the poverty mindset to keep us bound, but broke through from it. And for me, one of them was the cost of a business class ticket compared to an economy class ticket. And I remember being in the back of planes next to the bathrooms all the time and thinking, this is the way we're supposed to be, because we don't have the money and it would cost. And if somebody had actually handed me the money to fly business, I would have probably banked it and flown coach, because now I can have a little more money. That was the mindset. And what I found out is this dissatisfaction with that way of travel, because I knew there's a better way. And when I would see all the businessmen and women lining up to get into the planes, I would say, why can't I be one of those people? Why am I accepting this as my reality, right? So I started to contest against that in my own heart. And eventually I started to fly business. And when I did, and there's a lot more to that story that needs to stay out of this particular podcast, but when I did, I realized that space that I entered is not just a place where you have maybe a flat bed to sleep on and maybe more meals than the people in coach. It's not about the comfort as much as it is about the environment. I can't emphasize enough to get ourselves into an environment where there is achievement and vision and dreams and passion and capacity for greatness and greatness itself. And in those cabins, there's a difference in the air. Even in the very air that comes into the cabin, they say that it's more filtered and whatever, but there's actually a difference in the atmosphere in those spaces. I've written books in those spaces that did really well. I've had ideas that transformed into something really powerful for others and for organizations we were leading, and ideas about how to increase in financial abundance and things like that came in that space. And when we lived in a very wealthy area, because before we bought this property, I would walk every day in that place where billionaires live, so that I could harness out of the air, out of the atmosphere, the environment of old money in Connecticut, USA, what was making these people so successful. And so it's so important to break free from that mindset of, let's just get the cheapest, let's get the best deal. Are we going to generate economies, or are we just going to survive in them? Like producer consumer, what you said, Claire.
Yeah. That's something just for me that my dad did when I was little. And this is something you can do for your kids too. When I was, when we were little, my dad would make me fly business class. He would make me fly up there, and he would make me sit separate from him. And part of that was, could have been because time away from the kids, but it really wasn't that, because I wasn't that crazy. It was more along the lines of, he wanted me to get used to that atmosphere. But in my adult life, I was, it was over 10 years ago. I was with Chris Blackaby in Brazil, and I'd just gone through a time in my life where I'd lost everything. And I had true Southern boy. I had, to my name, I had $500, my guns, and my cigars.
You had everything.
You want?
What else could I?
What do you mean you lost everything?
Yeah, I'd lost businesses, I'd lost millions, I'd lost everything. But I had that. And so I was with Chris Blackaby in Brazil. And I walked up, and we were flying from Brazil to Doha, and then Doha to Australia. So it was giant, literally across the world flight, 15 hours, 3-hour layover, 15 hours. And so we walk up to and I'm flying coach, and we walk up to the desk, and Chris Blackaby says, "Hi, this is my friend. This is my friend Joseph, and he would like to fly business class today. Do you have any free upgrades?" And the guy looked at Chris like, "Who are you to ask me that different kind of stuff and that kind of stuff?" Right. And so, but then he went and did it, and I got upgraded to business class. And so I flew business class for the first time in my, first time after I'd lost everything. Right. And so you're in that place where you feel like you're a failure. You failed. I'm a, all that kind of stuff. And now I'm being thrust back up into that place that I lost. And now I'm back here, nothing. And now I'm being thrown back up there. And I'm in the flight. I'm on the flight and enjoying, all the different kind of stuff there in the environment that you're talking about, and the environment that I had been accustomed to. And we're beginning to land in Doha. And just for the sake of the podcast, I'll throw something spiritual in there. Not that what we talked about isn't unbelievably spiritual, it is. But we're landing in Doha, and then all of a sudden, every principality, every power, every prince of the region came up to the runway as we were landing and kneeled down. And I looked at God, and I looked at them, and I looked at God, and I said, these are not only angels, these are demons, these are principalities, this is everything. I said, God, what's going on? And God said, whenever a king enters the region, every knee will bow, and everybody in the region will acknowledge the arrival of a king. And it completely changed the way that I thought about myself and the way that I saw that different kind of stuff. And guys, that kind of stuff comes from is as not petty as it is, flying business class. You put yourself in that environment, and guess what? Not only will the natural stuff line up, but your encounters in the spirituality that you encounter will line up too, because when you begin to see yourself as a king, the realm of the spirit will begin to treat you like one.
Right.
So good.
So powerful, man. Yeah, and this idea of paying full price for things or not negotiating beyond the level that stewardship demands, right? The man comes to do some work in my house. Anything I talk him out of in terms of his compensation is me taking away from him what he may be worth for having spent his life becoming the best plumber, the best electrician, the best contractor that he could be. And what am I going to do? Walk away with $100 or $1,000 and go brag about how I talked this guy down and out of what is rightfully his when we make so much doing what we do and that sort of thing. So there's a fine line between getting the best deal as good stewards of those resources that we are entrusted with, and then the other side being being cheap and being stingy and not being large-hearted. Largeness of heart is one of the things God gave to Solomon when he asked for wisdom. He said, because you asked for wisdom, I'm going to give you riches as much as anybody's ever had, and largeness of heart. And that largeness of heart is what encompasses generosity, what encompasses the international transformational power that is in us, even to affect the cosmos, I believe, by the stances we take here. And so I think paying full price or going to the best places and being a blessing, leaving 100% tips. Danielle and I were recently at a place, we left 100% tip, didn't even wait long enough, though I tried, to say goodbye to the people that we were doing this with, because I wanted to see their expression on their face when they saw it, but we actually left without even seeing it. But I know what that would have done for them. If anything else, it makes them feel valued, right? So are we really changing? What's $110 or whatever the bill was that day for me to double if we have the resources to do so? And what will that do to that person in terms of adding value to them or showing them the value they have to us?
Very good.
Yeah. Awesome.
Ladies, anything?
Anything clear?
No.
Danielle, anything?
Nope.
So perhaps we can wrap it by saying it hasn't always been this way for us. We've been through some stuff. We've been through perhaps seasons or periods that we would be labeled poor by the standards of what poor is. We've been there where we had 16 cents, I remember, in the bank one weekend before our next paycheck was coming. I remember 16 cents. Many times just being broke. But somehow we didn't accept these things, not one of us, as our reality that we're going to live out of the rest of our days. What would we say to somebody listening to this that's just coming into an awareness of perhaps the mindsets that have kept them from advancing in these areas? What would we say to someone who's being challenged by what just got released or encouraged maybe?
Yeah. So having been in that place many times, being minus thousands of dollars because I'd rather pay the IRS than not pay the IRS, and like been in those kinds of situations. I've been in bad situations like that before. And the one thing that is common in every one of those situations is that one of the designs is to steal hope from your life. Mm-hmm. And in those times when you're in that, if it is tough, if it is hard, find hope. Look for hope and look for hope in Jesus. Look for hope in the promise. Look in the promise of the future. Look for hope in Bible verses. Look for hope in things that he's promised you. Look for hope in any way that you can find it. If hope looks like this gorgeous tea mug that Claire is drinking out of, find some hope. I don't want to be religious and tell you that I can tell you that your eternal hope is in Jesus, but I can tell you that you can find hope in anything, anywhere. And during those times when you're going through those difficult times and been in those difficult times, if you can remain hopeful, you will come through it much faster and much better than you ever thought that you would.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good. I agree 100%. And I feel like recently I did a like a short podcast on called Spoiled Child or Thankful Hair. And I just think that, what Joseph you're referring to is finding that hope, finding him in those things and focusing on him and being thankful for who he is in our life and what he's doing in our life right now, and not constantly looking toward what he's going to do or what he could do or what we want him to do. And when we project our wants and what we think he should be doing, we're actually limiting him. And so being thankful for what Yahweh is doing in our lives and what he's given us is the stewardship and what we need. I think often we can become those spoiled children, and we're always wanting more and we're always wanting something else. And we think that we don't have enough, or that somebody has more than what I have and I want what they have. And rather than finding that hope and finding him and stewarding what he's given us. So I think it's a choice. We can be those spoiled children, or we can step into thankful hair. And when we do, and it's air, it's not hair.
I made a mental note to go back to this later in the most sarcastic way.
Wow. Did an angel tell you that? Did you have a vision in the night where an angel came into you and said, Danielle, God unto thee, be thankful for thy hair?
Hair. Hair. I was a first grade teacher and I taught phonics. So I'm seeing the word and saying it phonetically. Okay. That's my excuse. No, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'm going to stop. I think you get the point.
I think two practical things. One thing, when we got married, or before that actually, when we were dating, Joseph and I really struggled. I mean, he had to fly halfway across the world to date me in Sweden. So the plane tickets in and of itself were quite intense. But something we made a decision of is we are going to value the character, the whatever that God values. And so one of the things is excellence. And we've talked about excellence here, whether it is choosing to buy a business class ticket, and whether it is, and we decided that we are going to eat out. And when we do, we're going to do it well. We're not going to go out every day, but when we do it, we're going to do it with extreme intention behind it. And we're going to enjoy it. We're going to enjoy the time together, and we're going to be excellent in terms of the waiters, in terms of how we treat people, in terms of the entire setup. And I think that's something that really has made a difference in how we now value something, so that we can then expand on that intention. Another thing that we do is we celebrate the victory before it has happened. We literally will find a way that means celebration to the two of us. And if there's something we're coming into, the day before we start celebrating.
Champagne and caviar.
I mean, at one point it was cupcakes.
One point it was cupcakes. We did have cupcakes, celebratory cupcakes.
Whatever it is. And this we did in terms of my citizenship. I had to wait for a very long time. And it was a huge process for us. But the day before we started, we knew the next day they were going to make a decision the day before we start celebrating. And we just celebrated and celebrated. And every time, because it is not necessarily about the outcome, it is about the heart intent that changes the outcome.
So powerful.
So good.
This is also great. For me, I guess my parting words would be that for stewardship to take place, we have to steward what is in our hand and not compare ourselves to what someone else is stewarding or to that individual. And I'm only responsible for what I'm driving, what I'm living in, what I'm purchasing, what path God has put me on in life, and I'm not responsible for anyone else's. And one of the things that was fun is that we decided on this name Lamborghini Tears, because the Lamborghini is a symbol coming into great wealth. Some of the crypto millionaires and billionaires were buying Lamborghinis in 2017 to 2019. They were all over the place in Silicon Valley and beyond. And we said Lamborghini Tears, as Joseph described earlier, because there's the tiers of stewarding wealth and the tiers of not having wealth. We prefer the one of stewarding wealth. It is not something easy to do. And yet I'm not responsible for something I don't own. I'm not responsible for someone else's Lamborghini. Until I have one, I'm not responsible for it. And recently we did something for some friends in Japan, and one of the individuals in the cameras, when in the Zoom chat, said, he was kind of jumping on this talk about how we can have nice things, and said, can I have a Rolls Royce if I want a Rolls Royce? And I asked the question, what are you driving now? And how are you stewarding what you're driving now? Because the oil change for a Rolls Royce is perhaps more than what a used car costs in some parts of the world, just to change the oil. Or when people do this big talk about flying jets across the world and owning planes, have you done the research to see what it would cost to fly for 1 hour in a jet that you own, and what responsibility that is with airports, with governments, with entities that we don't even know about, right? So we can't just throw words around or have expectations of things and put these burdens on us of stewardship that we're not accountable for. I'm accountable for what I have in my hand. And I'm saying this because for many who are watching this, perhaps you're in environments that doesn't have the abundance that we have here in America, or even in our own lives. You're not held accountable for what you don't have. We're only held accountable for what is in our hand. And with that, we can do great things. It's not about what it is or how much it is. It's about what we do with it. And I believe money, a good friend of mine says, money talks louder than anything that has a voice. And I found that to be true. The way we are perceived is going to be tied to the way we're stewarding some of these things. So as I squeeze the very last of this Bliss Sticks that I kept for such a time as this. Come on, man, come out.
Oh, there's more in this one over here.
No, I haven't used this one up yet, Danielle. Just don't ruin my myself. But thank you so much, Joseph and Claire, for coming to our home. You've blessed us by being here. You're a blessing to the nations and to the cosmos, and a great blessing in our lives. And thank you for giving us an opportunity to be with your people on your Patreon site through this podcast.
Yeah, thanks guys so much for coming. We love you guys a lot, and we'll see you in about 30 seconds.
Yes, we'll see you in 30 seconds for the fast that continues.